I don't think I realized it consciously how much I had a lot of self-judgment for my failures, how much that was blocking the acceptance of God's forgiveness for me, as a child of God. And I'm just happier, more confident. My kids want to be around me. My wife can't wait to see me when I get home. And I turn around and I put my hands on her cheeks and I said, "Will you marry me?" And she was shocked. She didn't think that's what I was going to say. And she said, "I will." And I said, "Do you take me to be your husband?" She said, "I do." And then she asked me, "Do you take me to be your wife?" And I said, "I do." My 15-year-old, she's 15 now, my 15-year-old daughter started crying and she ran and she jumped up and hugged my wife, almost pulled her to the ground. And she said, "Thank you for marrying Daddy again."
Jeff, thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me and be here with the other guys.
I'm excited, man. Thanks for having me.
All right. So, for the guys watching this, we're going to be doing an interview with Jeff about how he turned around his marriage, where he was before his marriage was turned around, and it is a process. It literally is a journey. But before we get to the journey, who is Jeff Roberts? Just a little bit of information, like where you're from, what do you do, a little bit of background.
Hey, you bet, guys. Boy, I'm happy to have all you guys on here. I hope my story will help you out, give you some hope. My name's Jeff Roberts. I'm a general contractor, live up in the panhandle of North Idaho, off-grid with my 4 awesome children and my renewed marriage with my wonderful wife. That we went through a brief divorce, but we got 22 years under the belt up here by the Canadian border. Been in a one-room cabin for a few years. It's kind of close quarters, but it's a pretty cool life out in the woods, enjoying God's creation.
Tell us a little bit about you. You came into Amazing Marriage Fast Track. I mean, really, you came into Amazing Marriage Blueprint. They're both different programs that we have.
Yep.
That was, I believe, in April of 2022. Tell us before, what was going on or not going on in your relationship with your wife, Tracy, at the time. What were the challenges you were experiencing going back like 2020, 2021, and in the early part of 2022?
Yeah, so we're in it for 20 years. First 10 years of marriage, just bliss, phenomenal. The kids started coming, had some medical issues and things like that. I think as a lot of marriages, we just started drifting apart. I wasn't really happy in the marriage. I think she was very unhappy, but I'm one of those till death do us part guys. So, hey, I'm just going to tough it out. It's okay. Things progressively getting tougher. We had some big blow-ups back in 2017. There's a lot of distance between us, really a big divergent in beliefs and ideals and values. And at the time, I had some anger issues, getting mad, blowing up, thinking everything's her fault, no violence or anything like that, but just certainly not being a great husband in the deal. And we came back from that. She's a good woman. We worked through it. That was 6 years ago. But beginning of 2022, she started talking about divorce and, hey, I'm just not feeling happy in this marriage and maybe we'd be better off. I want you to be happy. You don't seem very happy, so maybe we should just call it. I'm not on board with this, but I definitely see, what she's saying. And
one second, what happened when Tracy said, hey, maybe let's put these 19 years behind us and part ways? And you've done work on yourself. Like you said, you've worked through those anger issues. Like you've definitely made some personal progress. What goes through your head when she says, hey, maybe let's just part ways? What was running through your head?
Well, part of me was like, yeah, I didn't say this, but in my heart, I'm thinking I'm not real happy, but I'm not going to divorce this woman. I'm not going to throw away our marriage. But I'm also thinking, why are you willing to throw away this marriage? It's not that bad. I'm not out drinking or doing drugs. Neither of us are cheating on each other. What is your level of dissatisfaction, lady? Why would you throw this away? So I was kind of taken aback. I kind of understood it, but not really, I guess. And so it's sort of lost. And I'll tell you what really started hitting me hard is my 14-year-old daughter. I've always had a really close relationship with her. And it wasn't that she was going through rebellion or that we were fighting, but I just started feeling this distance between us. And my wife's telling me, hey, you need to reconnect with the kids, maybe less time at work, less stress, be more present. You're going to lose your relationship with your kids. And that was actually probably one of the things that really got my attention. And when I first came across your program is you talked about relationship with your children. And at this point, I didn't have a whole lot of hope that the relationship with my wife was going to get much better, but I didn't want to get a divorce. But I thought maybe I can grow this relationship with my daughter or look at what's maybe going on with me so I can rebuild that.
So we'll get back to that soon. So you're saying the reason
Yeah.
why you joined the program was primarily because you wanted to salvage the relationship with your daughter. Did I get that right?
That in the relationship part and prevent a divorce. I didn't really think I had much hope that there would be a big emotional connection with my wife. I just didn't really think that was going to happen, but maybe I could keep a divorce from happening.
And the reason for not wanting divorce, I think it's important to talk about it because I think a lot of the men in this Facebook group are probably more come from your faith tradition than mine. And I think a lot of the motivation of wanting to keep the marriage was, like you said, till death do us part.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the difference between, or maybe how it worked together, your religious reasons for wanting to keep the marriage together, and at the same time the emotional reasons for wanting to keep it together, and how they work together or not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Being an evangelical Christian and my biblical beliefs is you don't get a divorce unless somebody cheats on somebody or something like that. Those are really the only options you have, or one of the spouses is a non-believer. So I was just committed. Hey, we've got to tough this out. And then for my kids' sake, and I think a lot of dads say that, I don't want my kids to grow up in a divorced family, because I've seen the statistics of that. It's tragic. It's devastating. So I thought, man, I've got to hold this together. But again, I didn't think, I'm going to have this great blissful marriage with my wife. I just got to keep this ship together. She took my last name. My kids took my last name. That's my job. I'm the captain of this ship. I got to keep us off the rocks. So that was a big drive for me.
It really is like clockwork in a sad way. That, like you said, the statistics, like it's almost clockwork. When there is a divorce in a marriage or a deeply dysfunctional marriage, it's almost certainty that most of the kids are going to follow that path. Some kids are going to say, "I never want to be like my parents," but even most of them, statistically, even most of the ones who say I don't want to be like my parents will end up being like their parents. So that is it's a real factor. Obviously, it can't be the only motivation. When we spoke, I remember it was very clear that you loved Tracy. That was like, if you only say you want to work on the marriage because of religious reasons or for the sake of your kids, if that is the only factor, I actually disqualify people for that reason, because the things that we teach, as you know, can be very manipulative, and if you don't actually, it can be manipulative in the wrong hands, that is. And if you don't actually love somebody, it will be manipulative. If you love somebody, it's not manipulative, right? You know what I mean? Like, that is something we've worked on together. So share a little bit about what attracted you to Amazing Marriage Fast Track. What did you, before you became a student, a client, what was it that you saw? Okay, let's take a real look at this.
It was really fascinating. When I was watching the video that you had out there, it was amazing. It was like you were looking into my home and seeing the drama and the conversations and the difficulties. My wife would talk about when I'd be on my way home from work that everybody would be on pins and needles. Was the house clean? Was everything going the way that dad would want it and whatnot? And I thought, man, that sucks. And you were talking about that in your video, and that was exactly what was happening. You were talking about the confusion, me as a man. Why is my wife not happy? Why isn't she content? I'm a decent guy. I'm a pretty good husband. Why is she wanting to throw away this marriage? So none of it made sense to me, And you were explaining that, hey, you have the answers to this. The things that you were bringing up were, wow, man, just point by point, exactly what was going on in my life and in my marriage.
And what was the biggest takeaway that you had from that eye-opening first exposure? Because it is so true that when you have marriage cancer, it affects a lot of parts of your life, but at the same time, there are certain real basics, and you touched on it. You were like, why can't... I'm a pretty good guy. Why is it that I'm not making that connection? And how do you think I know it? I went through this myself. And then I worked with hundreds of guys as they went through this. So obviously my experience became broader. But that's a big one. Like, why is it that my wife doesn't feel my love? Like, I'm a good guy, and we know when we're being good or we mean good. And what would be like the biggest aha moment you had? Again, before you signed up for the program, what was the big aha moment in a nutshell? Not like, okay, I saw what was going on, but what can you share with the guys watching this video in terms of a takeaway that you got from all that training, the free training before you joined, that you were like, okay, this makes sense for me? Because there are guys watching this. Not all the guys belong in Amazing Marriage Fast Track. Let's be honest. We can't everybody, and some, for a number of reasons beyond the scope of this interview. But some guys are thinking, okay, how do I know if this might be for me. So why don't you talk about what was it for you? Like in a
Yep.
nutshell, if I put you
Right.
under pressure and I say it in 30, 40 seconds, and I don't know what you're going to say because it could be one of 10 different things. What was it that you saw that was like, okay, this is something for me? Specific.
I knew I loved my wife. I love my wife, man. Like I said, our first 10 years were just amazing. We were definitely soulmates. And that's something you say, hey, if you don't believe that your wife is the one for you, then this isn't the right program for you. I knew that she was, man. She was the woman I had waited for my whole life. I was ecstatic. I thought most of that emotional ship had sailed, but I still had this deep love for her. And it was so frustrating that she didn't feel that love. I felt it. I'm trying to convey it. I would give the world for her. At least that's what I thought. And she's not feeling it. And I'm thinking, why can't you see this? Why would you just not want to keep me? And you're talking about it. You're like, hey, there are things that prevent that communication, that prevent that conveyance of those feelings, that your wife's just not going to see it. She's not going to believe it. She's not going to feel it. And unless you understand how to break through those walls, you're not going to make a lot of headway. And the things that you were talking about and explaining made sense of that. Those are what I'm running into. She's not, buying her flowers and just bringing that home. That doesn't fix it.
Right.
There's some deeper issues.
Now, I just want to recap because there's a lot that you just said. You downloaded. I want to highlight one point, which was the main theme, what you just said in the last minute. How is it that I have love for her and she doesn't feel it? Obviously, I'm doing something, right? That I'm blocking her from feeling unconditional love. What is it that I'm doing? That is a fundamental piece for guys. Not everybody cares about it. Quite frankly, a lot of guys just feel like, hey, I don't want divorce. Religious reasons, till death do us part. Or or I want to be a role model for the kids. Nothing wrong with that. It's just incomplete, right? But the foundation was, hey, what is it that I'm saying or doing which is blocking her from feeling unconditional love? That's a massive, really fun foundation. So let's fast forward a little bit. You get into the program and let's just try to do this in an organized way or in a comprehensive, I should say in a short way, because we worked on and off together. We worked together for a couple of weeks. Then you took a break and then you came back a couple of months later and we did something deeper. And then you worked on it on your own with the strategy that I gave you. What would you say was the big takeaway that you saw for yourself once you joined and face-to-face with the training and the strategies and the working together? What was the big takeaway you had for yourself before working on the marriage?
Coming into the program, I thought, okay, I'm going to figure out how to save my marriage and I'm going to fix what's wrong with my wife. We're going to get her straightened out, right? Oh, man. No. No. So much, man. There's so much I could say. This has been a year and a half working with you and going through this process. One of the big things that I learned through all this was the judgment that you convey to your wife. Maybe you don't think it, you don't feel it, but not having that forgiveness, having that judgment or standards. And I'm looking as I start to realize how much time and effort my wife had put into the marriage over the years. And I was just oblivious to it or just not receptive to meet her at that level. And I thought,
Jeff,
man, I want a second chance.
Can I jump in for a minute? Because I want the guys to understand what you just said. And for the guys watching this, let me know in the comments. Like, this is something very interesting. How many times does your wife indicate that she feels judged or criticized and you don't even know what happened? Like, I didn't judge her. I don't know what's wrong. What is she saying? Why is she saying that? That is a very... I want to know in the comments, how many of you guys watching this experienced that? Because we know we shouldn't judge and criticize our wives. That doesn't take a marriage expert to tell you that. The trick is, there are times she sometimes feels it. And you didn't know why. And then you were able to download and see exactly, step by step, exactly what are the things you're saying or doing that were making her feel judged or criticized. And I think it's important for guys to understand it, because that's the beginning of real healing. Before we talk about let's talk about the marriage. Let's fast forward a little bit. The fun part, how long ago did you renew your vows?
Our 3rd week anniversary was Saturday. So it's 3 weeks and what? 2 days, 3 days? Yeah.
Your new anniversary.
My new anniversary, yeah.
And that, so you went to, one second, you did it in church or you did it somewhere else?
I did it on a mountaintop in West Virginia.
Mountaintop in West Virginia. Okay, now, okay, let's get into what happened right before. You were driving with her in West Virginia, okay? And what is it that she said to you? She turned to you, because this I do remember. She turned to you and she said something that indicated that she suddenly saw you in a whole different light? Like all the work you did over a year and a half, suddenly it all came out. What was what did she say? What was the, if these guys watching this video were a fly on the wall in your car, what would they see or hear?
She said a couple of things, and the first thing was that, and she'd been real quiet for a little bit, and again, we were divorced. There was no contact. We weren't talking much. The reason we were out in West Virginia wasn't a good thing. We were out there to settle some custody disputes, and she was going to leave and go across the country and take the kids. And I'm like, yeah, over my lawyer's dead body. We're driving around. She's getting real quiet. And she said, most people that I've talked to that have been through a long marriage at some point have gone through dark valleys and had to fight to fix their marriage or had to fight to save it. And she said, there's been times in our 20 years together that you've been working to try to save it. There's been times that I've been working to try to save it. But if we were both working together at the same time, we could do this. And I was like, wow. And I was just quiet for a little bit, and I was kind of taken aback. And I thought, man, maybe we've got a chance here. Maybe this is my moment to turn this around. And again, she'd served me divorce papers 18 months prior. This was August of 2023, and she served me divorce papers in basically May or June of 2022.
And you got divorced when?
It was finalized last August, so a little over a year ago.
Wow. And in that moment, when you saw that all the work you put in over the past year and a half is suddenly, and you prayed a lot. You're a man of prayer. You've used that as well, but you worked really hard. You followed the strategy. You followed the steps of identifying the part of your personality, communicating your changes to her. You went through the divorce. You still lived by that higher standard. And then in the moment when you saw it all come almost as if as a response to prayer and as a response to all the work you've done, what went through your head? The first feeling when you saw, 1 second, we may be able to get back together. Like the first initial feeling.
Man, I believe there might be at some point, I didn't believe it at this point, there might be a chance to save my marriage. I never thought that we would ever have the emotional connection again that we had shared in the past, so that deep intimacy and that being just totally enamored in each other's presence and whatnot. And I was starting to feel that, and I think she was starting to feel that, because those walls have been breaking down. And I thought, I can have my wife back, and not just a wife or a wife that I've been with for 20 years, but my wife, Tracy, and we can have what we have had and had for those many years in our marriage that I let lapse in my own lackadaisical way. And it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And so we got out of the car, and I still hadn't said much to her. And we're looking over this mountain, this valley up on this mountain lookout. And I thought, I'm a man. I'm going to pop the question right doggone now. And I turned around and I put my hands on her cheeks and I said, will you marry me? And she was shocked. She didn't think that's what I was going to say. And she said, I will. And I said, do you take me to be your husband? She said, I do. And then she asked me, do you take me to be your wife? And I said, I do. And that's something that should have had to never get to that point. But that had been 18 months in the working. And I'll tell you, just joking around, I told her last year when I was in the program, I said, hey, it's going to be a shame to let some other lady get me, because I'm a pretty cool guy now. I'm a pretty good catch. And you put in 20 years, you ought to be the one. And she's, no, I'm done. And she told me in the car, I would like to have a chance at having you as my husband again.
I love that. By the way, you said that too fast. So I want to rewind that a little bit and help guys understand what you said. What happened was, as we were working together, there's a certain point where I told you, I say, look, you have now become an amazing husband. You have this skill. You could read it. You could interpret. You know how to respond. You know how to connect. Now, she also has to open her heart on some level. But I said, wouldn't it be a shame if another woman gets to benefit from the amazing Jeff Roberts that you've become? And you actually said that to her, right? I said, hey, let her know that. And you did. And it took time for that to settle in, because she had to see that your changes were consistent. She had to be able to trust them. Because when you have marriage cancer, women don't get upset overnight or over a month or two. It takes years for them to get upset or to get really stuck. And it takes sometimes a significant time to reverse it. So it may have taken 10, 15, 18 years for your marriage cancer to build up, but it took 18 months to reverse it. So it's 18 years versus 18 months. It's still 18 months is still long, but in context, it's not. But what happened was she suddenly threw back the line at you that you used a year before. And she said, this is not right. This is not right. Why should another woman get to benefit from all the changes that you made? I want to be that woman. I want to get it. And that is the reason why I'm explaining it, Jeff, because that on its own wouldn't work. That was a result. You can't just say those words to your wife if it's not really true. But since you had clarity, and I think it's worth explaining, you had clarity on what it means to be a best husband. Like you knew what it means to be a better version of yourself. You knew what it means to see those things that are blocking her from feeling love, from feeling your love. What is it? Can you talk a little bit about, first of all, can I tell guys about this little, a couple of weeks ago, we were on a call and she suddenly popped on the call.
Yeah, go ahead.
Or maybe you can say it, if you can just briefly describe it.
So again, my wife said, "Hey, I'm leaving you. I'm leaving North Idaho. I'm taking the kids to West Virginia, and you're not going to stop me." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, man, West Virginia, I can't have that." I got my lawyers lined up, and I said, "Hey, I'll fly out there. I'm going to look it over, and then I'm going to come up with."
I'm talking about what happened when we really, because that's already like details in the previous part. I'm talking about when we got on the call together, and then
So David knew that things were pretty bad. I'd let you know, hey, it's not working out, because about a month prior, I said, "Hey, I'm giving up on this. I'm not going to try to keep fighting for this marriage. She's miserable. I'm going to let her go." And so that's to the point that we were. And so that's why we were in West Virginia. And so we exchanged vows on that mountaintop. So I immediately messaged Dave. I'm like, "Hey, man, we need to have a call." And he said, "I can do it Monday," which is like a day away. And we were actually on the airplane Monday for his only window. I thought, "Oh, man." So I said, "It's going to have to be Friday." And he's not. And I'm thinking, Dave's thinking, "Why are you telling me it's an emergency, but you're putting out a week?" But finally on Friday, we give him a call, and I can tell he's discouraged because he's put all this work into me. It's been 18 months, and he's looking down at his computer. He's all right. And he knows I'm going to tell him, "Hey, the divorce is over. She moved out, blah, 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 blah." And he's looking down at his computer, and he's talking to me, but he's not making eye contact. And he said, "Is there anything you need to tell me that I don't know from our last conversation?" And I said, "Yeah." And I turned the camera over to my wife, who's sitting next to me. And he looks up from the screen, and the look of shock on his face was just priceless. It was amazing to see him finally see the fruits of all the work that you put into this knucklehead. But most guys are until they get things figured out.
Yeah, it's like you're getting on this call, and I'm like, okay, what's the agenda here? And you're right. And then I see Tracy there, and you're both like with your rings. You're both like showing your rings. And it was like, that was really magical. It was beautiful. And, you put the work into it. And I think it's important for guys to know you put in work. You put in 18 months. And at some points, you even went through the divorce. And you not only went through the divorce, got to the point that you were like, you're almost not going to even try to reconnect with her. And then, all that work suddenly just came to fruition. Can you talk a little bit about the emotional connection you have with her right now? What is it like? How is it different in your second marriage right now?
It's phenomenal. My relationship with my wife, same thing with my relationship with God, learning to not have that judgment. I wasn't a real judgmental guy. I didn't express a lot of things. I didn't say a lot of things negative to my wife, but I certainly felt judgment. Hey, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And she sensed it. She's a woman. She picks up on that. Learning to not have that and just feeling compassion and acceptance, and then learning to forgive myself for my shortcomings, not holding myself to a standard of perfection, just immensely benefited in my prayer life and my relationship with God. And then my kids, just obviously I was expressing that to them in some kind of a subconscious way as well. So my relationship with everyone just got so much better. But the connection that we have now, especially knowing what we lost, going through that time of divorce, knowing what we might not have right now because of the 20 years together, we're so much more mature and so much deeper because we understand what's at stake, and we know how fragile that can be if you don't stay on the gas, if you don't continually aggressively work on keeping that connection and making sure your wife, that she's feeling appreciated. You may already appreciate her and love her, but she has to feel it for it to work. And so it's just amazing. And I got to the point where I didn't need her validation or her approval for things. I got to that point where I was fine with who I was and where I was at. But now it's such a wonderful thing to have it after not having it for the last year and a half. It's just awesome. And it's amazing. It's just really amazing.
And what has it done for your kids?
Oh my gosh. So my kids didn't know that we got married out in West Virginia. So when we get back, we bought a cake that said "just married." And so we walk in the house and the kids are looking at this cake and they don't know they're like, what does this mean? Who got married? And then my wife and I hold up our rings. My 15-year-old, she's 15 now, my 15-year-old daughter started crying and she ran and she jumped up and hugged my wife, almost pulled her to the ground. And she said, thank you for marrying daddy again. And that was huge, man. Our kids were having anxiety. There was a lot of stress in their world because of what was going on in our marriage. And just last night, my wife and I were in bed talking, and she said, the kids are doing so much better. We heard them out in the front room. They were laughing. They were playing. Instead of the bickering and the fighting and the things that have been going on over the last year or two, because of probably what they were seeing with Tracy and I, it's just amazing. They're so happy. Just in my growth, they went from, hey, we're going to move out with mom to like 6 months ago, all 4 kids were like, if mom moves, we're not going. We're staying with you, dad. And that's directly the growth, as a result of the growth and the maturity and becoming a better man, a better father, a better son of God. That's just a result of that. The proof is in the pudding in that regard.
And you're the pudding, man.
Sweet chocolate vanilla, baby.
That's so beautiful, man. It's so cool to hear that because it does sometimes take more work than some situations take more work. It depends on the amount of marital cancer, the length of the marriage, and so many factors go into determining that outcome. But what's beautiful is that even when you were going through the divorce, the kids were saying, we want to be with you, which was a direct result. Not that I'm saying that's ideal, right? But the fact that they wanted that shows that you have done some real quality work on yourself in terms of becoming the best version of yourself as a man, as a son of God, as a parent. Your kids saw that. And then the appreciation that they have for you and for your wife for marrying each other again. That is, you can't, it doesn't get better than that, really, to just see it all come together. And I want guys to understand this. You glossed over it very fast. You said the word subconscious, right? To subconsciously, there are things that happen subconsciously that people around us pick up. Our kids, our wives, our employees, coworkers, boss, whatever it is, they pick things up about us. It's that part of our personality that matters most. But since you were able to, that's what we do in AMFT, Amazing Marriage Fast Track, is we help guys identify that exact part of their personality that is driving away everything else. Can you talk about a little bit? And again, AMFT is not for everybody, but this interview is still motivational for a lot of guys because it gives guys a vision and understanding of where they could head to. Can you talk a little bit about what is it like to go around day to day knowing exactly what your intuition is dialed in? You know what to do, you know what to say, you know what to not do or say. You're not guessing the entire time what to say to your wife and kids. Can you describe what is it like to be a man, a husband, a father, and you have a better relationship with God as a result as well? It all comes together. What is it like to have that solid footing and to really be living your best version of yourself, your higher identity?
It's awesome. I don't think I realized it consciously how much I had a lot of self-judgment for my failures, how much that was blocking the acceptance of God's forgiveness for me, as a child of God. And I'm just happier, more confident. My kids want to be around me. My wife can't wait to see me when I get home. My workers are like, man, you're like singing a lot of songs while we're at work, and you're a pretty happy guy. One of them said he might be a little too happy these days, but when you get home before, I'm worried about, oh man, what kind of horrible stuff my wife's going to say? How am I going to respond to it? Do I fight with her? Do I not say anything? Because you don't know. You don't know how to handle the marriage cancer you talked about, the dynamics when there's all that tension. I think as a guy, inherently, we're not real well wired for dealing with women on that emotional level, that they need you to mature and develop those elements of who you are as a man so that they can feel confident in you as a husband and being dependable there every day, not just bringing in the money, not just protecting them, keeping a roof over their head, but as their emotional partner, and that they can connect with you. That's super important. So just knowing that, hey, maybe everything's still not perfect. My wife and I still have little bumps in the road, but I know how to navigate those with her. I know how to communicate with her, how to let her communicate, how to not have it turn into a fight, or I don't have to prove myself right or prove her wrong or make sure she understands how we can fix this, because I'm a fix-it kind of guy. That isn't necessarily what my wife needs. And so it's just phenomenal. The confidence that you have and just dealing with your family, your children it's awesome. It's totally awesome.
I want to focus on at one point you said, which you said it, but I want to magnify so guys get it. When your marriage is on solid ground, it juices you. You sing while you're working. Your kids benefit. You have a better relationship with God. Right? Some people say, I got to first work relationship with God in order to have a good marriage. There is some truth to that, but it's also incomplete. You also have to, it very often goes vice versa. You have to work on your marriage and love the person you can see in order to sometimes love a God that you can see, if it's okay, right? So could you talk a little bit about your, and again, and this principle follows the principle of top priority, which we teach in the program, which is when your marriage is right, it will juice other important parts of your life, your finances, your kids, your relationship with God, your relationship with your parents. It does some magical things. Can you talk a little bit about and we did talk about it already, but just to go deeper into, you were a very deeply religious person before we met as well, right? That's not where I helped you. At the same time, working on your marriage brought you closer to God. Can you describe that a little bit for the religious men? Because a lot of the guys here have a religious background on some level. So can you talk a little bit about, and to the guys, specifically to the guys who are like, I'm just going to work on myself, I'm just going to talk to God, and I surrender my marriage to God, and whatever God wants, and they just put it onto God, as opposed to taking responsibility to do the things that they can do. How would you talk to such a guy if he was your brother or your best friend? What would you say to him?
In going through this process, I've come to realize a lot of the same things that blocked my relationship with my wife, and having that deeper and more genuine connection with her, in a way I can't explain, are some of the same blocks that prevented me from having a deeper, closer, more genuine relationship with God. I might seek him in prayer. Hey, God, I need this. I need that. Or, man, I'm in a crisis. Help me out. But when you can't break down some of those, that sinful man, if you're a Christian guy, Paul says, I do the things I don't want to do, and I end up not doing the things I want to do. You've got these conflicts in your soul and in your spirit and your relationship with God and your relationship with your wife. In this program, Dave's got some little keywords. He'll teach you about what that is and how to work through that. Those same blocks will affect your relationship with God. They'll affect your relationship with your children, with your other family members. And like you learn in the program, your wife will probably be the last person to see it. And it's true. My kids were like on board after a few months. They're like, man, Dad, you've changed. This is cool. And coworkers, guys that worked for me, other family, but my wife was the last one to see it. But I was confident. I knew, I'll tell you what, going in, I thought, man, I'll never be able to recover from this emotionally. I'm broken. I'm a failure as a father. I'm a failure as a husband. How could this Christian guy, have his wife divorce him and have his family broke up like this? And I thought, man, I'm never going to be able to get through this. And the goal is to heal your marriage. That's what you're in this program for. But there's so much more that's going to come along with it. And I did get to that point where I was comfortable with the work that God was doing in me, with who I was as a man, who I was as a father. And I knew if my wife gave me another chance, I was going to be a great husband for her and she would be happy. And if she didn't, I was still a better person going through it. And I could have never saw that or envisioned that at the beginning. That was something that was unattainable. It's, man, I'm just going to be broken forever. Not the case, man. There is light at the end of the tunnel.
I remember that. That was a journey over here. And I think it's so helpful to share what you share. I think it's very important for us to just put things out there and just keep it real. And it's not even about religion necessarily, because we're from two different religions completely. Yeah. But it's the universal spiritual principles that all religions have. And it even applies to somebody who's not religious. It will work I've seen this work for atheists and agnostics, just the way we do it on a strategic level. It's surprising, and then of course after a while they're no longer atheist and agnostic. But in the beginning, it's not about a specific religion or even religious practices. It's about certain spiritual values, which every major religion has. And when actually used correctly, it unlocks you with God, with your wife, with your kids, most importantly with yourself, because that's where it all comes from. And man, I could talk to you forever. It's always we have a lot of laughter, even in the darkest of times. There was a lot of joy in the process, because it's not pain free. You have a great attitude, and it's amazing that you get to reap the fruits of your labor, and at the same time give hope to other men. And like I said, for guys who do want to consider if this Amazing Marriage Fast Track is for you or not, just write down evaluation or help me. I understand that as well. And we'll take it from there. And that will wrap it up. Thank you so much. And guys, have a great evening. Jeff, thanks again for taking the time. And I look forward. Oh, I do want to say this. I do look forward. Tracy did indicate that she's open to having an interview together with you. But now that you're married for 3 weeks, I think she prefers to wait for 3 months or something, or 6 months. She wants to get before she puts herself out there, which makes total sense. So she said, hey, I actually want to wait a little bit before I go public, so to speak. And so I look for, why am I saying that? I look forward to interviewing you again, and the guys over here are going to be waiting to see your progress as well. Just putting you under a little bit of pressure over there, which is a little, because sometimes, I'll tell you what, sometimes guys, after they turn around their marriage, they actually get complacent. This is actually a real issue. Like a lot of guys, they get the trophy back, they get their wife, they get the intimacy, they get the connection, they get the communication, and then it becomes, hey, and then a lot of their old personality comes back, and it's hard to pinpoint. It's not necessarily an overt judgmental critical. It's not. It's very subtle. It's hard to detect, which is why we have a process and a strategy. But anyway, thanks again. I look forward to interviewing you again, and with that, I'm going to wish everybody a great evening. And we will.
Thanks a lot, David.
We'll see you guys next week. Absolutely.